would now like to introduce you all to our panel members and our moderator of our inaugural panel discussion on New World, New Agenda, Building Perspectives on CSR, ESG, and Governance in Developing World. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming, starting with our moderator, Mr. Nitesh Mehrotra, Sustainability and ESG Partner, EY. With a huge round of applause, please join me in welcoming our moderator, followed by our panelist, Mr. Ashwini Saxena, CEO, GSW Foundation, Mr. Satish Rao, Chairman, DRT Anthea Aromatics Limited, Mr. Martin Manros, CEO and co-founder, Snowcap. Ladies and gentlemen, with a huge round of applause, it's our very first panel discussion. Over to you, Mr. Mehrotra.
Thank you. Thanks, Ankita, and thanks, Rishi, as well as Sapphire Connect for this inaugural session, and an honor and privilege to be among all of you and with my esteemed panelists here to talk a little bit about why we are here. And just to add on to what Ankita and Rishi talked about, a quick reminder in terms of why we are here and what we're going to talk about, setting the context. I think, as all of you know, at the heart of it is climate change and social inequity. I think are by far the biggest challenge faced by humanity at the moment. As we speak, some of you would have seen United Nations are now officially called that we are not in the era of global warming, but global boiling at the moment. And I think it's unprecedented what's happening. We are seeing the impact, and I think the heat records are getting broken day by day, and we're all seeing the impacts. And I think if we look at the global compass of climate change, we are about 1.2 degrees Celsius of heating above pre-industrial level, and if we were to cross 2 degrees Celsius, then we are in uncharted territory. And at the heart of it is that even with all the pledges, commitments globally, enterprise, nations have made, we are still above 2.3, 2.4 degrees Celsius. And I think that's at the heart of it, right? And then some would argue, where does social come from? I think people who have done the least will suffer the most, right? And we saw that during COVID, and that's why the people agenda that we're going to talk a little bit about on social inequity is very, very critical. It has to be a just transition because the developed world has used a lot of resources, and now the developing world has to grow in a sustainable manner. And I think that's the term that we all call, you hear it, I call it the alphabet soup, whether it's sustainability, CSR, ESG, which has been there, I think, in an Indian culture for many years, but now I think it's taking it to a different level, and I think that's what we will talk a little bit about. So with that, let me introduce quickly my esteemed panelist here, Ashwini Saxena, who's part of the CEO of JSW Foundation, a practitioner, has been doing a lot of these projects, and we will hear from him in terms of what works, what doesn't work, what's the approach in terms of executing what needs to be done. Mr. Satish Rao, Chairman of DRT Anthea Group, representing the business side of it in terms of how would the board and the C-suite look at it in terms of creating business cases for it. And then last and not the least, Martin, who's going to share with us the global perspective, a lot of research, data, and I would say how technology can help solve some of this problem. So I think that's the way we have this diverse panel set up today. So if I may, Satish, I'll start with you, or I think let's start with each of you. The first thing that we're going to focus on, while I think we're talking about what needs to be done, how do we look at that sustainability, ESG, create value for all the stakeholders? And when you look at the journey, how do you integrate within the business strategy of the organization? Because some would argue it's the business, right? It's not a separate exercise. So maybe some perspectives, Satish, starting with you, and then I will go with other panelists.
Sure, thank you. First of all, kudos to Sapphire to have conceptualized on such an important topic, which I really applaud, because that's the need of the day. Now, you're talking about the sustainability or the climate change, the issues. Let me first begin with each one of us here. as an individual. Who would love to have rains on a Diwali day? Why should you move from a city X to a city Y? Because your kid does not, you don't want to expose your kid to breathe the harmful air which he or she is breathing. That's the reality today. Let's look at the root cause. It is we who is responsible for that. You can't blame anybody else. I think that's the gravity, and very well said in terms of the statistics, what you just shared, that that's the 1.5% or 2% going, it's going to be disastrous. So I think this is the need of the day. It affects each one of us sitting in this room, and that's super critical. Now let's take the business part of it, or the business imperative. Why is this important? What is business? Business is about manage your cost, increase your top line, period. If you really dumb it down to as simple as two things. It's proven fact that if you take the sustainability oriented approach of business plan, your revenue is going to get increased bare minimum 5%. This is what the survey has showed. 47% of the corporates have said that their top line has a clear indication of increasing provided you take this route. It's not about whether it will do or not, it's about the how part of it. In fact, I recall a tea discussion with Martin a few minutes back that when a consultant came to the table saying that this is what plan you should lay out, and the client said, oh my gosh, but this would be expensive. He said, no, don't pay me any money, just pay me 50% of the profits, which you'll get out of this after 2 years. He said, what? Duh, it's as simple as that. So it's no longer about whether this will have a business impact. This is definitely a business ROI positive. I'm not going to reel out saying that, yes, we all know that when you go to a solar energy or a renewable energy, yes, you're doing good to the world, but mind you, you're saving a cost. I know one of my employees in Kerala, he's got his entire house on solar energy. He's charging his car through this solar energy, which is completely free of cost, and then he's getting his neighbor to use that and then makes money out of it. That's business model. I mean, that is how it works. It's simple maths. But the bigger point I want to make is this is the generation which has lost it. If you look at the younger ones, they are damn environment conscious. They would never carry a plastic bag in their hand. They almost feel ashamed. And our older generation. I just want to end with a quick 1-minute story, which I call it as a life, one day in a life of my grandmother. I remember she's in a district of Bangalore in Karnataka, and I clearly remember as a growing up boy going to that house. How does the day begin? The day begins with a datun, which is basically a bark of a tree, which is used and no chemicals used. She boils the water in that big vessel using the shredded bark of the trees which are there in her backyard. She goes to her backyard kitchen garden, picks up the vegetables which she wants, and cooks it in the house by using the fire. She lays the food on a banana leaf, which is then used as a fodder for the animal. She uses the waste of sewage waste to be manure for her plants. Guys, this is our Indian culture. This is what we are used to, and somewhere down the line, we lost it. We may call it as urbanization, we may call it as westernization, we may call it as prosperity. I don't want to call names, but we lost it. And I think we owe the obligation to give back to the next generation a planet which is better than what we inherited. I think that's the point I wanted to make. Thank you.
No, I think great perspective and great reminder, Satish. I think one is sustainability is everyone's business, right? So I think, as you said, whether it's the top line, bottom line, working capital, which are the 3 levers the organization is working on, and I think sustainability impacts all 3. So I think that's a great point. The other one, I think absolutely, I think it's sustainability is ingrained in our culture. I always say, adding to your point, the PhD on circularity for me is from my grandmom, because they taught us, and today I think we've shifted, we lost a little bit of it. The newer generation is getting it, you're absolutely right, but we have to be taught on sustainability from the globe, I think, which is a little bit ironic, right? So I think we need to go back to our culture and our roots and do it in a manner that it's speed and scale. I think that's the real challenge. Martin, do you want to weigh in with a little bit of your global perspective? How do you see it? in terms of what Globe is doing versus what India is doing, and
Yeah,
the value creation idea.
Absolutely, thank you so much. Just want to, as you start with saying that if humanity is going to reach its full potential, we have to become sustainable. There's no alternative. We cannot draw the best out of our collective minds and as people if we don't become sustainable, because that would just increase the inequality, it would make more people suffer, and it would not drive economy long term because we're running out of resources. And usually when I talk about sustainability, I think of it as a race where we all are participating. It could be a swim race or it could be a run race. Let's say it's for running. If you don't run or you run in the wrong direction, you're kind of out of the game. And sustainability is something that is not longer a trend. It's a change that has happened. We cannot be unsustainable in our business practices. I spent 27 years on working with this, so there's a lot of examples on business. But I can give you a few which are, should we say, more practical. I was helping a fast food chain in Sweden some years ago. They are the same size as McDonald's in terms of restaurants in that country, and they said, we want to become sustainable, what do we do? And there's some very practical examples you could do, right? They, for example, they had one veggie burger on their menu, and they said, people don't buy it. And I said, of course, you've got 16 other burgers, chicken or beef. Why don't you increase your range of veggie burgers to 5 or 3? And when that started happening, they had more sales on the alternative. And they attracted a new type of audience as well. And now they have 70% of their sales on non-meat burgers. They also had to do some changes in the layout of the restaurant, like the electrical cars would have the closest parking space to the entrance of the restaurant. They had to take away the plastic cups and things like that. And they saved money, they got more growth, and they also starting displaying what is the carbon emissions for each meal, so that people could make a conscious choice. That's just one example. I give you another one. It's an hotel chain in Sweden and in Europe called Scandic. They came to me already back in the late 90s, early 2000 we started. They wanted to make sustainable hotels. And for them, it was a revelation to understand that people don't need the small shampoo bottles. They want they are fine with one container in the shower where you could refill. That was the first, and that's now spread globally, right? Another example there was to actually design the room so the furniture was fixed to the walls, meaning you could clean the room much faster. So that was a cost saving as well. Eventually, they took away the minibar and placed it down in the reception. And now they're at the stage where that bar in the reception is actually unmanned, and you just scan what you want, and everything is recycled as well. Another thing they did was to reduce the buffet, because buffet is normally a lot of wasted food, and they start serving meal instead for individuals. So there's a lot of practical changes that can be done in a company.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks, Martin. And I think all of us would recall yesterday was the Earth Overshoot Day. So we consumed whatever we are eligible for yesterday. And I think now, back to the point both of them made, is that we will be borrowing from the future. And I think it's a great reminder. I mean, you look at it, August 2nd was the Earth Overshoot Day. And I think what's happening is clearly not sustainable. So coming, Ashwini, to you, how do we create business cases for that? I know you're a practitioner doing a lot of these projects, executing on the ground. How do you go about thinking of the creation of the business case, and what value would it drive for all the stakeholders?
Thank you, and apologies for the bad throat. I would like to begin with, where Satish and Martin were talking about. See, I think this whole idea of sustainability also needs to be, I would say, demystified in a sense that sustainability is only about making a business case.
Yeah.
It is a little above that. This is where I would like to begin with. I think he gave examples of how his grandmother has kind of adopted circularity and sustainable practices in our lifestyle. And I'm sure all of us have seen that in our grandparents and all. The point is, sustainability, ESG, CSR, no matter what name you use, idea is, are you taking informed decisions on the trade-offs that are emanating out of your business decisions? Every business decision that you take, it creates a certain trade-off. That trade-off has to be taken, accepted, and a decision has to be taken above that, keeping in mind a whole range of factors. He touched upon the human factors. He gave a lot of examples of environment. So it's also important to take a step and say, this is value creation.
Yeah.
But then, is there something which is value protection as well? So therefore, sustainability cannot be just about a business case and value creation. You can always not have a positive social return on your investment. Today we try measuring all our social investments through a social return on investment, right? But to me, it comes across not just as an ROI calculation.
Right.
It's about a decision making. That there are certain things for which there would be a negative SROI in a sense in the shorter term. But there you have to take a decision that yes, these are important
Non-negotiable.
and non-negotiables. These are important facets of human life. These are important factors for the environment around me and my business. And therefore they need to be taken care of. So I think first and foremost beginning point is that you have to keep in mind the value protection and value creation, both the aspects in your mind when you're deciding a particular business process. And when he was saying that maybe our generation and the earlier one kind of missed it and therefore we owe it to our parents, I think it also, let's not be too harsh on ourselves. Let's accept that a whole lot of what we were discussing over the cup of tea is that how rapid changes in lifestyles have taken place, which have kind of put the entire traditional knowledge, the old ways of living and conducting your life to a certain extent, it's kind of stopped there. And therefore we'll have to keep on devising new ways. Human ingenuity, I have complete faith in it. You give us 20 problems, we'll come back with 40 solutions. That's what I think we are about. That's what puts human race so ahead of any other creature on this world. So of course, I don't believe in pessimism. So if we have problems, we'll find out new solutions. We've got technology to our advantage. And I think therefore, as a business enterprise, if I look at it, it's important for me to number one, know what is my footprint. Two, what are the likely impacts of those footprints? Three, what all can I mitigate on my own?
Yeah.
What is it that I can manage on my own? Fourth, what are the larger scenarios which are not possible by one enterprise, and therefore it would need some policy directive, it may require some collaborative efforts. Climate change, biodiversity, these kind of complex topics that we talk about cannot be just managed by one organization or one government or one country itself also. I mean, it's much larger, complex, and I would say complicated situation. So it's important to keep on, the way we've kind of seen is, what is that part of problem that I can solve on my own? What is it for which I need collaborations? I need more perspectives, more resources, both financial and non-financial. And then see where all this put together can be becoming a policy directive by which the government and the governments, let me use the word, can actually help all of us in achieving those targets that we are setting for ourselves. So I think, to me, breaking down a situation, every decision with this larger perspective in mind, I think that's where the answer comes from.
Right. No, absolutely, Ashwini. I think well said. In a way, how can our values create value, right? Because eventually, it's part of the values that an organization has. And I think I also want to emphasize the point, Ashwini, you made is very important, that there are interdependencies and trade-off, right? It's not a simple math. And I think while I know in business sense, the point that you highlight is very true, we look at standard metrics, right, which may not work in terms of demystifying the complexity this complex ecosystem has. And I think the other point that you said is also very right, that we alone can't solve these problems, right? I think the world, one would say 20,000 scientists for last 20 years have been in terms of supplying the data, in terms of highlighting the problem. But I think the solve is complex, and I think we need an ecosystem, I think, as you said, and I think collaboration is the real way to do. And I think forums like this, hopefully we can highlight what others are doing. So there are some inspiration stories in terms of which we could leverage from globally, and obviously a lot from our India as well, right? Because a lot of time that happens, especially in the country, we don't want to talk about and communicate in terms of what great work that we do, and it gets embedded at the down, and people at the board may not know, but the people at the watchman level, they know what's happening, and there are great stories. So no, absolutely great reminder, Ashwani. So I think switching gears a little bit, now that we all know the importance, and obviously it's about our value system, why it needs to be done, right? I think a lot's been said. I want to start with, again, a little bit in terms of what are the challenges once we start about executing these projects, right? What are the pitfalls and how do we encounter those, right, in terms of execution? So again, maybe Satish, starting with you, what challenges do you see? How do we solve it with people, process, technology? Probably we need all three to really attack on this problem.
Okay, we all heard it. There's no debate on whether it is good or not good. That debate is over. And if that debate is happening, we are in serious problem. So that's out of the table. Now the issue is the how part of it. I think there lies the challenge. Let's get that straight. It's good to say that we need to reduce our carbon footprint. Imagine a global company with 50 factories across the world. How do you measure this? How do you measure carbon emission? How do you measure how much are you burning in the process of moving your raw material, finished goods, work in progress, crisscross? Huge problem. And let's get this straight. Anything which we talk about we need to do, if it can't be measured, it can't be done. Let's get that straight, right? At the end of the day, we are all in business. We love numbers, and numbers don't lie. How do you get that numbers? How do you calculate it, whether it's data analytics, whether it's AI, whether it is SAP? I'm not going to get into that. So that's the challenge number one, that a CEO can make a tall claim, but then when it percolates through the organization, how does each member measure what I did today? Is it a sustainable route or not? Problem number one. Problem number two is, in a forums like this, we all nod our heads saying that, yeah, this is a good thing. But guys, this is not how the 7 billion people in the world think so. I think we as ambassadors of this earth need to rally this message loud, repetitively to our stakeholders. We need to carry our vendors with us. We need to carry our customers with us. Now we ask our vendors, no longer we ask, what do you produce? We ask them, how do you produce? That's a different shift. I just wanted to share one interview, which probably I was sitting on the other side of the interview panel, interviewing a management trainee entering, a 21-year-old young kid. Sometimes you really get energy out of these kids, and I just sat there for fun to see how do they attend the interview, because I attended maybe 3 decades back. I was floored with one of the questions this kid asked, because I was trying to give them, okay, this is a $2 billion company, we make this profit, blah, blah, blah. I said, okay, I heard all this, Mr. Rao, but tell me, how are you contributing to the balance sheet of this planet? Wow, I was floored. First, the kid had the courage to ask that. B, what a pertinent question, and I didn't have an answer. This, if we feel that we know it all and we do it all, guys, let's take this in a humble tone. We don't do it. And if we do it, please spread it to 4 other people. I think that's the challenge. So I just want to simplify it that A, to measure it is not easy. B, as corporate citizens of this world, please cascade. That's why I said what you're doing is fantastic. Please relay this message that it is not about a nice to do or good to do. You need to do it, and it makes business sense. It makes personal sense. That's what my comment is.
I think the point on humility is so important, because we don't have. Martin, I know you wanted to come in. You've been itching to come in.
I'm quite happy that I can help you with the first challenge here, right? Let's give an example first. When Africa got phone, they skipped the landline. They went straight to mobile phone. They did not have to go through that process that the West had done digging down or setting up copper lines of the whole continent. They went straight to the latest technology. And I just want to send that message here that India, you don't have to make all the mistakes we made in Europe going sustainable. You can go straight to much more efficient solutions today. And when we talk about measurements, because that's what we do in SNOWCAP, right? Where companies have 50 facilities in 30 countries, they have 4,000 suppliers, they are complex, right? But the fact is that the most of the data that we need to calculate already sits in systems. They sit in your ERP in terms of data they sit in your bill of material, they sit with your supply, they sit in your facility management solutions. We can convert that into carbon by using emission factors. And we can get fairly exact, right? Of course, there are global emission factors, but we all know a diesel truck here in India uses a different diesel than in Germany, so you have a different factor. And we can actually adjust that. So that part has actually got a lot more effective and efficient over the last couple of years in terms of how to measure. But I think also it is, you have to embrace the fact that it's not just about reporting. That's where we started in West and went for many, many years. It was about reporting and making claims, saying, oh, we are, and that became greenwashing over time because they didn't do the actions. They just said what the status was, but not what they did to change anything. We're now in a different phase in the work where it's not about reporting. It's a good starting point, but you need to take actions the whole time. Later today, I will speak about the economy of sustainability, and I can guarantee you already now, the cost of doing nothing is higher than starting taking actions.